It is therefore ordered that you shall be put to death by electrocution in the mode prescribed by law, and that you shall be transferred to the custody of the warden.
This is the way she looked when she was 15. She was arrested and charged with the murder of 78-year-old Bible school teacher Ruth Pelkey.
In 1944, George Stinney Jr. was just 14 when a rush to judgment sent him to his death in South Carolina's electric chair.
This is Tiffany Cole, and at just 24 years old, she is facing charges of murder of an elderly couple she once called friends. The victims were 61-year-old Carol and Reggie Sumner. They had once known Cole's family from back in South Carolina. When they moved to Florida, they even let Tiffany and her boyfriend stay in their home when they visited. That's when the plan began. According to prosecutors, Tiffany Cole, her boyfriend Michael Jackson, and two accomplices, Alan Wade and Bruce Nixon, conspired to rob the Sumners. But this wouldn't be a break-in. They had decided that it would be a kidnapping and murder, designed for maximum profit and minimum risk. On a warm July night in 2005, Wade and Nixon knocked on the Sumners' door, pretending to need a phone. The couple let them in, trusting and unaware.
Neighbor tells family that she remembers seeing a strange car come and go from the Sumners' house. And family says that they think that Carol and Reggie probably were just being nice, allowing the group to stay overnight so they didn't have to make the trip to and from Charleston all in one day.
And that was when the attack, which would end with both Reggie and Carol dead, began. When police were notified, they found the Sumners' home empty of the homeowners. They also found that the Sumners had somehow disappeared without Reggie's wheelchair and his medications, and now they grew suspicious. A search confirmed what the police had suspected. Whoever had abducted the Sumners also made away with their car and their ATM cards, and so the police issued a statewide alert. This alert would lead the police detectives to their vehicle, a Lincoln Town car, found 50 miles away from Jacksonville, unlocked, with the ignition keys missing. And then, the police received a rather strange phone call.
How you doing? My name is Reggie Sumner. I'm out of town with my wife right now. Her sister passed away. A friend of ours that lives in the neighborhood called this morning and said that the garage is open and that the Lincoln was missing. We just moved actually to there not long ago from South Carolina.
The police knew whoever was on the phone did not sound like Wade. Shortly, they were able to track the Sumners' ATM card, which was being used, and with the surveillance footage taken from the ATM stand, they knew who they were looking for. To a South Carolina motel where Cole and other members of the group were hiding. Arrests were swift, and once Cole was in custody, she confessed to the crime.
What was the purpose of this? To get the credit cards and stuff?
Bruce Nixon, however, did not just confess to the crime. He also took detectives to the place where the Sumners were buried. He told them that they had bound and blindfolded the couple before shoving them into the trunk of their own Lincoln Town car. They arrived at a remote spot, the grave already dug in Charleston County woods. The couple were lowered into the earth, still alive and covered with dirt, suffocating to death. With all this information, the police had enough to charge them, and Tiffany was arraigned before the court. In court, Tiffany's lawyers tried to plead that she was unaware that the group were planning to kill the couple and pointed about an abuse she had received from her father, claiming that she had been coerced in the whole event.
Her lawyer told the court Tiffany Cole thought the grave was for items they were stealing. He also talked about that sexual abuse.
But the prosecution was quick to squash that argument as they showed pictures of her celebrating in the car after the murders. At trial, jurors needed less than 90 minutes to find Tiffany Cole guilty of first-degree murder, and they recommended the death penalty. The judge agreed, and 5 months later, Tiffany Cole received the death penalty, becoming one of the youngest women on death row in America.
Do you call it death row?
No, we call it life row.
It's life row.
Life row? Why?
Because we're not dying, we're living.
But in 2016, everything changed. A U.S. Supreme Court ruling found Florida's death penalty system unconstitutional if the jury's recommendation wasn't unanimous, and so Tiffany, who had received a 9-3 vote, had to be resentenced. The jury deliberated 3 hours, and this time the vote was 10-2 for life. On August 23, 2023, Tiffany Cole was spared execution. She will now spend the rest of her life in prison.
Big local story that we've been following since 2005. The Florida Supreme Court has thrown out the death sentence for Tiffany Cole.
accused of murdering a St. Nicholas couple by burying them alive in Georgia.
Cole was only 24 when she and her friends murdered an elderly couple for their money. But how does that compare to a 19-year-old who is currently facing a death sentence for a jealous attack?
It is therefore ordered that you shall be put to death by electrocution in the mode prescribed by law, and that you shall be transferred.
This is 19-year-old Christa Pike, standing trial in a Tennessee courtroom, accused of carrying out one of the most sadistic murders in the state's history. Authorities say it all began in January of 1995, when Pike lured a fellow student, 19-year-old Colleen Slemmer, out of her dorm room and into a wooded area on campus. Pike believed wrongly that Colleen was trying to steal her boyfriend, and for that singular act, she made sure that Colleen would pay in the most traumatic way ever. Pike wasn't alone. She had help from her boyfriend, 17-year-old Daryl Shipp, and 18-year-old Shadala Peterson. Shipp joined her in the torture, while Peterson stood watch.
Just let me go, I'll not say anything. And they said, you know, we can't do that. You know, we've already done stuff to you.
What happened next would shake even the most seasoned investigators. Pike and Shipp began a brutal, drawn-out assault, slashing Colleen repeatedly with a box cutter and a meat cleaver. Then, they beat her with a chunk of asphalt, striking her head continuously until she finally gave up the ghost. But they weren't done. In a disturbing final act, Pike and Shipp carved a pentagram, a symbol which is often associated with satanic rituals, right into Colleen's chest. And then, Christa did something even more chilling. She cut out a piece of Colleen's skull and kept it. She took home with her a literal trophy, something to remember the murder by.
This is the skull from the victim.
When police found Colleen's body, they were horrified, not just by the state of the scene, but by the markings, the mutilation. But behind all that, they could also feel the sheer rage that seemed to fuel it. When Pike was arrested, she confessed openly, without remorse.
I just right there because she made me so mad. And I just couldn't let her. And she was just going, please don't, please don't. I said, shut up, I don't want to talk to you. I want you to talk to me.
In court, her defense team painted a picture of a troubled childhood. They told the court that Pike had been through it all: abuse, neglect, and trauma. But the prosecution focused on the brutality of the crime.
Cracked her skull, and gray matter did spill from Colleen's.
The jury deliberated and returned with a verdict of guilty on all counts. And then came the sentence.
It is therefore ordered that you shall be put to death by electrocution in the mode prescribed by law, and that you shall be transferred to the custody of the warden at the Tennessee Prison Facility. And further, on the 12th day of January, 1997, your body shall be subjected to shock by sufficient current of electricity. May God have mercy upon you.
As the sentence was read, Pike broke down.
Can I please have my mom before I go?
Mr. Bates, please hold Miss Pike in the dock.
Please, let me just love my mom.
Please hold Miss Pike in the dock.
I love you. I love you too. And I love you too.
Her boyfriend, Daryl Shipp, was given life in prison with the possibility of parole after 25 years. Over the years, she's made several attempts to get off death row, but every motion, every appeal has been denied.
For the only woman on Tennessee's death row, a judge has denied Christa Pike's motion to have her death sentence reconsidered.
She remains on death row. Christa was just 19-year-old when she got a death sentence, but here is a defendant who was sentenced to death for the crime she committed at 15.
This is the way she looked when she was 15. She was arrested and charged with the murder of 78-year-old Bible school teacher Ruth Pelkey.
This is 15-year-old Paula Cooper, and she is in Gary, Indiana, facing charges of murder for the brutal stabbing of 78-year-old Bible teacher Ruth Pelk. It was May 14, 1985, when Cooper, along with 3 teenage friends, skipped school, drank alcohol, smoked marijuana, and then headed to Pelk's home under the pretense of asking for Bible lessons. But what followed was a complete nightmare. Cooper pulled a butcher knife over a foot long and stabbed Pelk 33 times in the chest and stomach. One girl struck Pelka with a vase, another cut her arms and legs. At one point, Cooper's friend held the knife in place and twisted it, demanding the elderly woman reveal where her valuables were hidden. And then they took $10 and a 1976 Plymouth. Authorities later found Pelk's body inside her home, a crime scene so gruesome it shook the Gary Police Department and the relatives of the dead woman. It was not long before they traced the killings to Paula and the others, and when Cooper was arrested and arraigned. In court, the prosecution pushed for the ultimate punishment, death, painting Cooper as violent, unrepentant, and dangerous, someone for whom there was no hope of redemption.
Asking her where she had hid her money, which she didn't have any, and then slicing her and cutting her and stabbing her 30 times, and then driving the butcher knife through her chest. The conditions were so horrific that I felt I had no choice under the existent law.
But the defense argued otherwise. They told the court that Paula was a victim of lifelong abuse, a girl forced to watch her mother rape, a child who had known violence far longer than she had known safety. They even claimed her own mother once tried to kill her. Still, the jury didn't budge. And on July 11, 1986, the judge sentenced her to death. Cooper was just 16 years old. The decision sparked international outrage. Pope John Paul II personally appealed to Indiana's governor, and over 2 million people signed a petition asking for clemency.
The Vatican delivered 2 million petition signatures to Crawford asking that the death penalty be dropped, to no avail.
Even the United Nations weighed in, and editorials around the world questioned how America could sentence a child to die. In 1988, the U.S. Supreme Court ruled it unconstitutional to execute those under 16. And in 1989, the Indiana Supreme Court overturned her death sentence. Paula Cooper would serve nearly 3 decades behind bars. During that time, she earned her GED, took college courses, helped out with charity, and even received letters of forgiveness from the grandson of her victim, Bill Pelka, who even visited her in prison.
I mean, I don't care if I have to sweep floors, wash dishes, or flip hamburgers. I'm gonna take whatever I can get, you know, just to get on my feet and show people that I deserve a chance.
On June 17, 2013, Cooper walked out of prison a free woman.
She was the youngest death row inmate in the country. Today, she's a free woman. 43-year-old Paula Cooper exited the Rockville facility this morning.
She hasn't really had the opportunity to be responsible for cooking for herself, for managing her finances, for those sorts of things that we all learn in our teens and early 20s. She has missed all of that. And so she's going to need a lot of support from.
Less than 2 years later, on May 26, 2015, Paula Cooper was dead. She had committed suicide at 45 years old.
Cooper was once the youngest person on death row in Indiana. Police say she shot herself Tuesday morning. Her body was found in a wooded area near her house. We now know Cooper left behind a suicide note describing her struggle to have a life outside of prison, where she spent 30 years of her life.
Paul Cooper walked into death row at only age 16, but here is George Stinney, who was only 14 when he was sentenced to death.
In 1944, George Stinney Jr. was just 14 when a rush to judgment sent him to his death in South Carolina's electric chair.
And this is George Junius Stinney Jr., a 14-year-old African-American boy who was arrested for the death of 2 white girls, 11-year-old Betty June Binnicker and 8-year-old Mary Emma Thames. Their battered bodies were found in a ditch in Alcolu, South Carolina, just yards from the black neighborhood where George lived.
The bodies of 11-year-old Betty June Binnicker and 7-year-old Mary Emma Thames were found in a ditch in the small town of Alcolu. A coroner's report at the time described a brutal beating. Multiple severe head injuries suggested the killer used a blunt instrument about the size of a hammer.
And that's all it took. On March 23, 1944, George was arrested. By the next day, police claimed he had confessed. But behind all this, people failed to realize that this was a 14-year-old, alone, no parents, no lawyer, just a deputy's word, and no written or signed statement. His little sister, Aimee, said she was with him the whole day, even when the girls stopped to ask them about flowers. But the police never called her for interrogation. They did not even let George see his family. The boy was kept alone in a jail 50 miles away, and the police claimed that this was for his own protection against a lynch mob. Less than a month later, April 24th, 1944, George was taken to trial. But what remains shocking is that the entire trial took just one day. With testimonies from the man who discovered the bodies, the medical examiner and police officers claiming George confessed to them while in custody. George's court-appointed defense attorney did not call any witness on stand, not even the victim's sister who was with George when they met the victims. He did not cross-examine any of the witnesses called by the prosecution either.
In the few records that still exist, Stinney allegedly confessed, even told police where to find the murder weapon. During the trial, his attorney called no witnesses, asked no questions.
The courtroom was packed with over 1,000 white onlookers, and not a single African-American person allowed inside. The all-white jury deliberated for only 10 minutes and came back with a guilty verdict.
In 1944, George Stinney Jr. was just 14 when a rush to judgment sent him to his death in South Carolina's electric chair. Convicted in the murders of two little white girls, Stinney's trial reportedly took just 3 hours. The all-white jury deliberated just 10 minutes.
George was sentenced to die, and on June 16, 1944, George Stinney Jr. was walked to the electric chair. He was so small, weighed less than 95 pounds, and had to sit on a Bible to fit. Decades passed, and in 2004, lawyers and activists reopened the case. They found what had always been there.
George Stinney could not have committed these murders. I think George Stinney saw those children, but I don't think George Stinney was the last person to see those children.
Still, the families of the victims still believe George was guilty.
They had no choice in how they died, and he did, and I think that justice was served according to the laws in 1944 when this happened.
But this time, George's sister had the opportunity to speak.
And I want to clear the air. We are not allowed to go any place without my mother's permission. They were very strict with us. We could not go no place, nowhere.
There was no physical evidence linking George to the crime, no signed confession. In all, it was a sham trial and a police narrative that changed more than once.
Ultimately, Stinney confessed to the murders, but no record of that confession exists. Sheely says it was a 600-year-old legal argument that made the case, as he and other attorneys presented evidence.
In 2014, a South Carolina judge threw out the conviction, 70 years after George's death. The court ruled he had been denied a fair trial and that the state had failed a child.
In her ruling, Circuit Court Judge Carmen Mullen writes that Stinney, who was black, was convicted by a jury of 12 white men, that his attorney did little to nothing in defending him, and that fundamental violations of due process exist.
After 70 years, George's sister rejoiced at the court's decision.
I feel exonerated. I feel happy. I feel blessed. I feel Lord and mercy, Jesus. I just wish my mom and daddy was here to see this day.
George had no chance, but 19-year-old Austin Meyers had a full trial and still ended up on death row after stabbing his friend 21 times.
Therefore, the sentence of death shall be imposed upon Austin Gregory Meyers.
This is 19-year-old Austin Meyers, and he is in court, facing the death penalty for a murder that began as a robber and then ended in one of the most brutal killings Ohio had seen in years. It was January 2014 when Meyers and his friend, Timothy Mosley, set out for Waynesville. Their target was the home of Justin Back, a high school senior, and someone they both knew. The plan, according to prosecutors, was premeditated: kill Justin, steal the safe inside his house, and disappear. Both Meyers and his friend had believed strangling their victim would be the clean option, but they were not expecting Justin to resist as much as he did. And when he did, they realized they had to switch tactics. And so they resorted to stabbing him, not once or twice. They took turns stabbing their victim 21 times. When arraigned before the court, Mosley later turned on Meyers, cutting a deal for life in prison in exchange for his testimony. Meyers didn't take the deal himself. Instead, in a surprising turn of events, he accused the prosecution of wrongful conviction and threatened to sue them.
During the trial, he actually had a conversation, a jail call with his dad, where he agreed that his plea agreement would be that if we dismissed all charges against him, that he wouldn't sue me for wrongful imprisonment.
And then, he finally had the opportunity to address the jury. He asked them to spare his life for the sake of his family.
I can't imagine to lose your brother. If you choose for me to die, it's only going to cause more pain and suffering for another family. Not me. It won't hurt me. I won't feel anything. It's gonna hurt more innocent people.
During victim impact statements, Justin's family addressed the court.
Austin could have stopped it, but tells Justin, it's okay, it's almost over. You could have changed your mind many times, but you didn't. Especially when Justin was begging for his life.
The father of the victim also took the stand to confront his son's killer.
I'm not gonna stand up here and tell you how much I hate you. That is without question. I would just hope that every time you close your eyes at night, you see my son Justin.
Even after that, Meyers wasn't finished. He stood one last time, pleading directly to the judge to spare his life.
No, I've made a horrible mistake. I'm only 19 years old. I think there's a lot of good things I can do with my life if you allow me to keep my life.
The judge was not convinced, and he went by the recommendation of the jury.
The defendant does not understand how precious life is. The court finds that the state has proven beyond a reasonable doubt that the aggravating circumstance outweighs the mitigating factor. Therefore, the sentence of death shall be imposed upon Austin Gregory Meyers on the charge of aggravated murder.
And as the sentence was read, Meyers showed no emotion. With that, the state of Ohio sent its youngest defendant to death row. Austin Meyers walked out of the courtroom with a death sentence, but how does this case compare to Dylan Roof, a 21-year-old who was sentenced to death for one of the worst hate crimes in recent history?
Verdict reached in the Dylan Roof murder trial. Mark, what is it? That verdict is death.
This is Dylan Roof, standing trial in South Carolina for one of the most horrifying racially motivated mass murders in American history. It was the summer of 2015 when 21-year-old Roof quietly entered Emmanuel African Methodist Episcopal Church in Charleston. And what would follow afterwards remains one of the most shocking events in America.
Roof, seen here on surveillance video, entered Emmanuel AME Church around 8:06 p.m. wearing a fanny pack. After attending a Bible study class for an hour, the court documents say he stood up and pulled out a handgun and began shooting. All 9 victims were shot multiple times.
Chaos broke out as the worshipers ran away from the firing gun. At the end of the attack, 9 people were confirmed dead. All of them were African American.
All units responding, 110 Calhoun State.
Active shooter, multiple people down.
The massacre would go down as one of the deadliest attacks on a house of worship in the United States.
This morning, I spoke with, and Vice President Biden spoke with Mayor Joe Riley and other leaders at Charleston to express our deep sorrow over the senseless murders that took place last night.
And I just heard every shot. I heard every single shot.
When it got to me, he could hear me praying, and he said, "Shut up. Did I shoot you yet?" And I said, "No." And he said, "I'm not going to. I'm going to leave you here to tell the story."
Roof fled the scene but was captured the next day during a traffic stop in North Carolina.
Further 1014 from Officer Davis advised that will be the correct vehicle for the immunization.
Don't forget to download the HH Greg app to find daily deals. HHGreg.com available 24/7. Buy online, pick up in stores, same day, always free. Top brands, low prices, fast delivery.
704-550-4122. And if you don't respond to the medication on...
When detectives searched inside his car, they found a Confederate flag, a handwritten manifesto laced with white supremacist rhetoric, and a list of other black churches he allegedly planned to target.
Among the items said to be found in Roof's car at the time of his arrest was an apparent hit list of more black churches in the Charleston area.
While in police custody, Roof confessed to the detectives. But what stood out to the officers was not just his admission, it was the apathy in his voice and the cold lack of remorse.
So you shoot him? Yes. What kind of gun did you use? A Glock 45. Okay.
At trial, prosecutors detailed the full extent of Roof's planning. They presented before the jury evidence of his deep-rooted hatred, online rants, Nazi iconography, and even a picture of him posed with a Confederate flag, all pointing to his white supremacist ideologies. The courtroom saw a young man driven by ideology and not impulse. Dylan had carefully studied his targets, scouted the church, and carried out the killings with deliberation.
An investigator with the Charleston County Sheriff's Office read from a journal she says Ruth kept after being arrested in connection with those murders. These are just some of the entries she read from the stand. White people are pretending like we are all the same and equal. I could not go another day without doing something. It was worth it. It isn't up to me anymore. I did what I could do. Jurors heard from family and friends of 4 of the deceased. Denise Quall spoke of her close relationship with her mother, Myra Thompson, who she says came to her in a dream before she died. Thompson's best friend also took the stand. The sister of the Reverend DePayne Middleton doctor testified about her devout faith and love of worship. Ruth, who is representing himself, didn't object to any of the testimony.
And there were no apologies or remorse whatsoever to those who were affected by his actions in the courtroom.
You hurt a lot of people, but God forgive you, and I forgive you.
You know, I forgive you and my family forgive you.
We are the family that love built. We have no room for hate, so we have to forgive.
Acted as his own attorney in the sentencing phase. Speaking to the jury, he did not offer apologies.
In the end, the court delivered the only sentence that matched the gravity of the crime. Dylan Roof was sentenced to death.
That verdict is death. After roughly 3 hours of deliberations, a jury of 3 black members and 9 white members agreed unanimously that Dylan Roof deserves to die for the murders of 9 black parishioners at the Mother Emanuel Church in June of 2015.